Here's your wrestling news for December 7th, 2020. And your headlines for today include: Austin Theory returns during NXT TakeOver WarGames. WWE edits Britt Baker out of NXT WarGames stream. WWE wrestlers expected to be released from WWE contract. WWE quietly makes big change to TLC match. Fan confesses to hacking WWE's Facebook page and also leaking AEW plans on Reddit. A close pal of Sting revealed the possible reason why Sting joined AEW. Gerald Brisco's WWE status after appearing on SmackDown for Patterson tribute. Keith Lee on Vince McMahon punching him in the jaw while he was a WWE extra. Good Brothers rejected WWE offer to use Talkin' Shop podcast. AEW star refused to work with AOP, and more. We're kicking off today with news from NXT TakeOver WarGames as Johnny Gargano reclaimed the North American Championship thanks to a big assist. During the show, several people in ghost face masks assisted Gargano, and though they were all fought off, one brandishing a lead pipe took out Damian Priest before revealing himself as Austin Theory. The former Raw superstar who was brought back to NXT, it seems that Theory will be working with Gargano from now on, and after months on the sidelines, we'll have to see what Theory and the new North American champion can accomplish from now on. Speaking of WarGames, this year's show took place without many live fans, and whilst Britt Baker was in the crowd last year, you wouldn't know it thanks to WWE themselves. An AEW star and the girlfriend of Adam Cole, Baker was shown during WarGames last year, something Mauro Ranallo called to on commentary, with her concerned pose for Cole being parodied on Dynamite and becoming a meme in the internet wrestling community. If you now go back and watch TakeOver WarGames 2019, you'll find that Baker has been edited out of the show, and they even took out Mauro's mention of the AEW star. It's not hard to see why WWE cut her from the show, though it's interesting that they didn't do this a year ago. And for now, the only place fans will see Britt Baker is on AEW content. Over to SmackDown, and whilst Wesley Blake and Steve Cutler appeared this week to aid King Corbin, their fellow forgotten son Jackson Ryker wasn't with them. Earlier this year, Ryker made several controversial comments online, including referring to the Black Lives Matter movement as garbage, and when an old photo of him with a fake, darker complexion reemerged on social media, he, Blake, and Cutler were all pulled from TV. During Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer explained that Ryker continues to have a lot of heat due to his comments, and said that whilst he hasn't been cut yet, fans can expect Ryker to be released in the next wave. It's unclear when WWE will have their next wave of cuts, but for the former gunner of TNA, his days in WWE are seemingly coming to an end. Now, with TakeOver WarGames over, we're looking ahead to WWE TLC, though that's something the company reportedly isn't doing. According to Ringside News, the company hasn't got many plans for the final pay-per-view of the year, with one source within the company saying WWE is, quote, way behind. To be fair, WWE has had a lot on its plate as of late, including the move to Tropicana Field, and we imagine the sudden passing of Pat Patterson has only hurt company morale. WWE still has the time to make changes to the show and add matches, but it's evident that the company is nowhere near where they want to be, less than 2 weeks away from their last pay-per-view of the year. Speaking of TLC, WWE has less than 2 weeks to announce matches and stipulations, but now one confirmed match will have weapons involved. It's already been confirmed that WWE Champion Drew McIntyre will defend his title against AJ Styles, but now the company has quietly made this a TLC match. This will be the second TLC match confirmed for the show, as Universal Champion Roman Reigns will face Kevin Owens in the same match stipulation, and time will tell what stipulations are made ahead of December 20th. Now, last week, reports came out that WCW and ECW would be rebooting in 2021, and though we didn't cover it, seeing it as clearly fake news, several news outlets did. Now, both Twitter accounts for WCW and ECW 2021 have been deleted, and the man behind these elaborate pranks, Alexander Fox, has revealed himself. In a statement, Fox said that these accounts were started because he was playing WWE 2K20 with WCW stars, but blamed dirt sheets and fans on Reddit for, quote, making me do all of this. Fox's confession then took an unexpected turn as he admitted to hacking WWE's Facebook page, as he admitted, I hacked WWE's Facebook account a lot of time, and I was leaking some of WWE and AEW plans on Reddit, and I'm proud of it. I will not forgive any of you because of you, my accounts are no more. I just tried to have some fun, and you seem to like it. Plus, I'm in depression because my girlfriend left me for an indie wrestler, and so because of this, I'll try my best to destroy the indie wrestling to never be seen ever again. Given that Rob Van Dam shot down rumors of an ECW 2021 reboot, and WWE never commented on a return for either brand, it was obvious that this wasn't a legitimate story, but now we know the person behind this bizarre situation. Over to AEW next, as Sting debuted for the company last week, and we may now know why. Last week's edition of Dynamite marked the first time Sting had been in a TNT-endorsed ring since 2001, and during the Hall of Famer podcast, Booker T theorized why Sting joined AEW. Booker believes that the icon wants to end his wrestling career the way he wanted to, and given that his WWE run has been largely criticized by fans and ended early thanks to an injury, it's clear why Sting would want to end his legendary career on his terms. Booker also spoke about Sting being 61 and described wrestling in 2020 as a young man's game, so time will tell whether Sting actually has a match 5 years after his Seth Rollins bout at Night of Champions 2015. Whatever happens, we know that Sting will be interviewed by Tony Schiavone on this week's Dynamite, and we'll have to wait and see what the icon has to say. Speaking of legends, the world sadly lost Pat Patterson last week, and during a tribute to the first ever Intercontinental Champion on SmackDown, fans spotted Patterson's friend and fellow stooge Gerald Brisco on the ramp. It's interesting that Brisco was there, given he was furloughed earlier this year and later called to be told his services are no longer required, but according to reports, fans shouldn't expect him back in WWE. According to a source within WWE for Ringside News, no one is back, and whilst Brisco had a sit-down interview which was quite emotional, there's no plans to bring him back into the company's fold. Whilst his appearance on SmackDown was a one-off deal, it was clearly the right thing to do given his history with Patterson, and we're pleased that legends like Gerald Brisco and Sergeant Slaughter were able to say goodbye to a fellow legend of the ring. Back to NXT TakeOver WarGames, as Shotzi Blackheart had her previous tank destroyed by Candice LeRae, but she still rode into WarGames in style. During the show, Blackheart revealed a new tank, which explains what she was working on during promos for the match, and with a skull on the front that'd make Triple H proud, the green-haired grappler had an entrance to remember. One superstar who didn't compete at WarGames is Karrion Kross, but that didn't stop the former NXT champion from making his presence known. After Dexter Lumis dispatched of Cameron Grimes, the announce team was set to throw to the next match when the screen was taken over by scenes showing vultures and ticking clocks. Kross then gave his tick-tock catchphrase, as it seems he'll be back very soon, and we're sure he'll be hungry to regain the NXT championship he was never defeated for. From one former NXT champion to another, as Keith Lee is doing big things on Raw, but it wasn't too long ago that he was an unknown name in WWE. During his new WWE 24 special on the network, the Limitless One spoke about working as an extra in WWE and being told he would need to sell a punch in the jaw by Vince McMahon. He said, "When I say he jawed me, so I go down and he looks confused. Of course, why would a 300-pound dude go down from one punch? And when they were done with the others, it was like, there's no way we're done with the big guy. So they picked me up and I was like, what did I do to deserve this?" Lee's career has come a long way since being jawed by the chairman on the March 30th, 2009 edition of Raw, and whilst he's now facing names like Randy Orton and Drew McIntyre, we're sure that McMahon wouldn't back down if Lee wanted a rematch. Now, WWE has no shortage of podcasts on their network, including shows from Corey Graves, Alexa Bliss, The New Day, and Lillian Garcia, but they nearly had the Good Brothers on that lineup too. When The Cut recently spoke with the Good Brothers, Luke Gallows revealed how the WWE tried to get their Talkin' Shop podcast as part of their brand, but without Rocky Romero involved. He explained, "WWE came to us and said they were going to have a podcast network and we want to have Corey Graves, The New Day, and you guys, and we were like, it's not the same. Aside from not liking the business offer on it, it's not the same. It's not Talkin' Shop without Rocky Romero, so we declined the offer on it. Then the pandemic started and we said, let's just do it ourselves and see if it catches on that we're actually doing it. Fast forward 4 weeks later and we're out of WWE, and now this thing takes on a life of its own, and now here we are doing our second pay-per-view in over a few months span. It's been pretty damn cool." Anderson explained how WWE wanted to produce their version of the Good Brothers podcast, saying, "WWE pulled us aside and said, we want you to do a podcast. We'll set you up in a room before Raw and we will have guests for you. And we looked at them and said, nah, We responded with, "If you want us, you have to come to the hotel at 10:30 p.m. on the road, set everybody up with some wine, and then we'll do it," and they agreed. Then they told us the money they wanted us to do it for, and we were like, "Nope, we're out. Podcasting ain't that fun." Now, Talkin' Shop is producing pay-per-views, something they could never do if they'd stayed in WWE, and whilst it's unknown if Anderson and Gallows would still be around if they'd let WWE have the name for their podcast, the duo certainly seems happier after their April 15th release. We're looking back at WWE's releases, as the Authors of Pain were cut from the company, and though some have believed they could head to AEW, that won't happen if QT Marshall has anything to say. During Talk is Jericho, Marshall said how he refused to work an NXT match against AOP even after discussing things with William Regal, and said that he was convinced that the team of Akam and Razor would injure him. To be fair, AOP had only recently injured Anthony Bowens thanks to a botched powerbomb, and when the AOP said they planned on powerbombing Marshall onto his tag partner, that sealed the deal for QT. Whilst he may have never made it in WWE, Marshall is doing pretty well for himself in AEW, and with him being in the ear of some pretty important people backstage, fans shouldn't expect to see Akam or Razor in Daly's place anytime soon. And finally, today we're ending with more news from NXT, as whilst last night's TakeOver WarGames was an epic show, several superstars were not able to attend. We reported last week that an anonymous NXT superstar had tested positive, and during Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer noted that there were a couple of more positive cases in the roster, but nobody who was booked for WarGames. In the past, WWE and specifically NXT have been criticized for their handling of outbreaks within their roster, and it's clear the Black and Gold brand hasn't learned its lesson.